Okay, so this video we're going to talk about syrup density and filter press. So that was the end of that draw off, so that was just a little hair under. That does. So before I get going on my filter press, I get mostly a full tank of syrup. Make sure it's all mixed up. Then I'm going to pull out the handy Murphy cup. I'm going to get a sample of the syrup and figure out what the actual density is. Now in theory, as long as you are accurate coming off, then it should all be correct. Alright, it's mostly warmed up. Let's dump that out. Get that warmed up again. So with the Murphy cup, for those who aren't who don't know about it, you can see here, this is telling you, reading the temperature, and then telling you at that temperature what your density should be reading on your hydrometer. So in this case, it's almost 61.5, or actually almost 60.5. So we'll put that in, and we're a little bit heavy at 61.25. So in this case, we'll take our hydrometer in our cup. We're going to rinse them out in our hot water we pulled off the back of the evaporator. I'll actually put in a couple of cups of water into my tank. Set that aside. I'm going to stir that up again. Now you want to use hot water, preferably your distilled water, off of your evaporator because it's already hot. You don't want to use raw sap or partially cooked sap to blend that off again. At that point, you're messing with your flavor because you're just putting something in that hasn't been cooked. And we were just discussing it. I said it's kind of like having an overcooked egg and then wanting to just add a raw egg to that. It doesn't work. And so see, that's pretty good right there. It's right at 61. I like my syrup a little bit heavy. My customers like it that way. But I will add a little extra water just because. I want to make sure this is really good. So based on the last measurement, that should be good. So I'll mix that up again. Then I'll pull my diatomaceous earth out. And yesterday, we were using about a cup and a half or so, or in my case, a big scoop. This is my cup. It's actually more than that, but it's my big scoop. So I'll put one of these in, so a full tub like that. And then what I'll do is I'll add a little more as I pump syrup through the filter press. So I'll mix that all in, get that mixed in good. Try not to splash any of this precious syrup off onto the floor. Then I'll open my valve up, turn my filter press on. A little cold this morning, so it's starting out a little slow. Or not starting at all, it's cold. Yep, here it goes. Once it warms up, it'll really get going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all my syrup into this, run it through all my hoses. This kind of pre-warms everything up. It's just going to go right back into my draw-off tank at the moment. Then once I've got syrup coming all the way through, I'll take my hose and I'll put that in my drum. I'll show you what that looks like. a little while, I'll show you what it looks like when we finally go to clean it, and what that should be. What that should be on the inside of this once we've got things clean. There it goes. And that's pretty good. That in my drum, turn my filter press on, we'll run it. So in this video we're going to show you a little bit of grading. We've already taken a sample of syrup out of the barrel, and now we're going to use our little Hanna light transmittancy tester to see what the light transmittancy is in this barrel of syrup. So it's pretty simple little rig, about 50 bucks. So you open it up, you stick your reference thing in, hit start. Okay, once that's done, set that aside, pull out your syrup sample. Now you don't want to get any fingerprints or anything on that jar, because that will affect your reading. And that's 49. So at this point, it's just over the line. It is now dark in color. Flavor might not be there. It's kind of the way that goes sometimes, but the color is definitely dark. So I'll take that sample, pour that back into my sample cup. I'll end up rinsing this out, hot water off the back of the evaporator. And then this, I will try a little bit of it hot, and I'll save the rest of it, and I'll try it when it's cold, so that I get a good range of what the flavor is. So hot, I mean, it's pretty tasty syrup. But like I said, I'll try that when it's cold. So that way if there's any kind of subtle nuances in the flavor, I should be able to pick them up at that point. But that's pretty good stuff right there. So now that we've run some of our syrup through the filter press and into a barrel, we've drawn off a couple more times, about to draw off again. So at this point, I'll take another little bit of a scoop. Think about yay much, and I'll stick that in there, mix that in, and you're going to gradually add, at this point, you're gradually keep adding your diatomaceous syrup into your mix as you're drawing off, and that way you get you don't like overload your press all in one shot and get it all plugged up too early. You want to just keep adding a little bit here and a little bit there, mix it in. While you're running your press, you're going to want to occasionally stir that. Even if you haven't added any earth into your draw-off tank, just stir it anyways. You got some in there. It will settle down on the bottom, so you just want to stir it. You make sure everything's continuously mixed. So at some point, you're going to want this thing packed. You'll end up with a big brick on the inside of each one of these plates. And you don't want too much earth, because you will plug it up quickly. If you have too little, your niter that you got in your syrup will plug it up. You'll just get like this thick slime on the inside. It'll plug up your papers, and you won't be able to get any syrup through. So you want to just kind of, that delicate balance, and it changes day to day, and it can even change during the day. It just depends on what the weather's doing, what the sap is doing. Right now we're pretty good. We're not getting a whole lot of niter off. We are getting some, but not a lot. So that's why I'm using about a scoop and a half or so to get a good pack out of my filters and get a lot of syrup through. Preferably, you'll get 45 to 50 gallons through a small press like this, only 5 days, and you get most of your barrel through that press without having to change it out. So a typical oil for us, we're changing it at least 2 to 3 times, depending on how much syrup we're making, how long of oil, and did I get that ratio right? Like I said, you're always changing it. I'm always working on it and trying to adjust And when we open this up in a little while, once it's done filtering, we'll find out, did I have enough? Did I have too much? Did I have more? Did I have less? We're going to find that out in a little bit. So at this point, the filter press is plugged up. No longer putting syrup through, or very, very little. So we're going to clean it out. Now, before we do that though, I'd like to know that with your filter press, these things only like to run at about 60 PSI. So you don't want to get any higher than that, or I've had people tell me they start having problems with their papers, and it'll literally just blow open a paper and you start getting your filter aid, so your diatomaceous syrup, through your filter press and then into your, still into your syrup, so it doesn't actually filter it out. So you want to keep that at 60 PSI max. So my air compressor is set at that. It works fine for everything. I haven't touched it. I set it at that. I've left it there. It's been that way for years. That way it just make things nice and smooth and easy for you. You don't have to keep messing with it. So at this time, obviously the air compressor's off. I'm gonna close my valve off to my draw-off tank. And I'm gonna take my hose off, quickly stick it in a bucket of hot water that we just pulled off the back of the evaporator. And I'm gonna run water through the filter press and clean out all the sugar out of it. Now, it makes it easier to clean the press, and at the same time, we'll test it later, but if the first bucket comes through at about 18% sugar, that's a little over a gallon of syrup. If the second bucket is 8% sugar, that's half a gallon of syrup. So I run about 10 gallons through my press, I get about a gallon and a half of syrup off that I'm saving every single time. If I'm doing that 2, 3, 4 times a day, it's a lot of syrup. It adds up. And that water, I'll show you, I'll then put back into my evaporator in the back end, and they'll just get boiled off again, so we don't waste any sugar, and therefore syrup. So I'll turn this on, and I'll start running it through and kind of chase the syrup out of my hoses. Hey, it's that plug that's just having a hard time doing this. There it goes. So I'm going to chase all my syrup out of the press, out of the hose, or most of it, and then that'll go, once I get most of it out, then I'll put the hose from the barrel into the bucket, so I don't dilute my syrup that's already in the barrel. Sometimes this takes a few minutes. Depends on how long you run it and how plugged things get. Whoops. Now, we used to not do this cleaning process. We used to just take the filter press apart, dump it out. Then somebody's like, well, how much sugar is in there? I don't know. So we started running water through it. And then we tested it and said, whoa, 5-gallon pail, the first one through is about 18% sugar, like every time. So we started doing the math. It was like, that's a barrel of syrup. So at the same time you're doing that, you also still have to keep watching your density on your evaporator. Hopefully this press kicks through and cleans fairly quickly, because we're going to overflow otherwise. Always interesting around your farm. Always something to do, always something we're working on. There it goes. Slowly. Same time, we'll check our film mold in the back pan, and that needs a little bit of defoamer. Little side note, around here we're certified organic, so we have to use an organic certified defoamer. So we use organic safflower oil. It's not as efficient as some of the commercial stuff, but it does the job. And at that point, we'll switch from our barrel to a 5-gallon pail. sometimes people ask us, well, what are you going to do with that? That kind of seems like it's a waste. And it's not, because we're just recycling it. That's going to go right in the back of the evaporator, boil again. Years ago, back when we first learned about this, we were boiling with some friends of ours, and they were bigger farm, and we started doing math, and what we were saving by cleaning the press out every time, at that point they were only doing 1 bucket, not 2. It was about 2 55-gallon drums for the syrup, so 110 gallons or more depending on year. So by the time you get to the second bucket, it's going a lot faster at this point. So that tells you that you're getting a lot of stuff out of your press. So in just a minute here, we're gonna open this puppy up to see how good the press turned out, whether we put too much earth in it or not enough. Usually my first one through was my trial one. After that, I was like, okay, I need to add more or not add as much. For our short boil today, I'll probably want to change these filters out one more time. And I'll chase all that water out. We don't want to splash it out of our bucket. A lot of syrup there. That's pretty good. So if you'll come over closer, we'll open up the press. Actually, at this point, I'll take my tray out. You always end up with a little bit of syrup that comes out, drips through your filter press. Don't waste that. We save it. Leave that right there. I'll put that back under next time. Open up the press. Pull out your block. And already I can see that I didn't have enough earth in there. So that needs a little bit more. So if I push part of that out, we look on the flip side, see how it's kind of got a cavity in there. There's still some a pocket. Definitely could have used some more. This should come out as a nice solid hard brick. Not too hard. That makes it that much more difficult to get it out. But it should come out hard. That's not too bad, but it could be better. So then you rinse off your plates when you're done. Yeah, that one's a little better. That was pretty good for the most part. You can see inside there. And it's mostly like a brick. That was close. Just had a thread on the plate there. It scared me for a second. I thought it was a giant crack. So, once I've done that, it's cleaned up, it's out of the way. shove my buckets out of the way. We'll pull new papers out. And I've had people tell me that they'll put 2 of these papers in, they'll double them up, and they'll put 2 in each time. I think it's a waste of papers. Shouldn't have to do that unless your press is just that different. This one, perfectly fine with 1 paper. And this press is an older press. I don't even remember what the manufacturer is on it. At some point we'll upgrade because it is getting a little bit small for our farm. So I end up having to change these out a lot. But filter presses are pretty simple. They are pretty easy to use. The hardest part is figuring out what is your ratio. How much earth do I need to put in? And by earth, I mean diatomaceous earth. That's what you're using. Some people just call that DE for short. Then you just tighten it back up again. Evenly, preferably, so you're not leaking out one side. Gets pretty tight. Excuse the rusty bar, that's what I've got to work with. I haven't found a nice stainless steel one yet. And just give that one last crank. And we should be good to go. So at this point I'll take my pan out of the, I just dumped out. Been partially steam clean. Put that back under here. And now we're back to put the earth back in your bin again. Well, I'll put a big scoop in. The cycle begins again. Get it all mixed up. And we'll fire it up. Once again, if you got any questions, drop us a question in the comments. Or you can always go to our website, shoot us a question on our chat. Oh yes, so before we do finish up, I will show you. So I take my hose again. Now it does have a little bit of water left in it from cleaning. That's going right back in here because once again, we're drawing off syrup a little bit heavy. So that little bit of water in there is just gonna blend right off, especially with a big bucket like that. It's about 20-ish gallons in this draw-off tank. And then these buckets, take them one at a time. We'll go to the back of the evaporator and we'll pour them in the back end. I'll do that later once I get the foam cleared out of my way and get my filter press going before that overflows from the evaporator. I think that's all for now.